special meeting for this, from the June 4th, 2026, with a table item that will be on our agenda tonight. We'd like first to have a meeting
Oh,
for this, from June 4th,
hold on.
2026. Table item being on the agenda tonight. We'd like first to do
Try it and see what happens. I don't know. Just maybe test it out first.
sound check, the technical difficulty, we'll give ourselves just a minute, see if we can catch the reverb.
Try it and see what happens. Maybe test it out.
Members of the commission, I would just like to make sure that you can hear me if it's necessary.
There we go.
We can hear you. We're just trying to, we've got feedback coming. So hold on. Okay, I think we're okay.
Test. All right, we'll try this again. We're gonna ask, you both to lead us in pledge of allegiance and open prayer, reading our expression of thought.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be gathered today as citizens and commissioners, staff, and others to this area. We're grateful for the freedoms that we have in this country, in the state, and the city. Grateful for the purpose. We pray humbly for thy spirit to be with us now, and we look thee in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. Our first item is declaration of conflicts of interest. All commissioners have had a chance to read the agenda for tonight. Is there anyone that needs to declare any comments of interest in it? Okay, seeing none, we will move forward to our first item, number 2. It's an administrative item, it's carryover, conditional use permit. Consideration of a table item from the June 4th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting for conditional use permit for residential facility for persons with a disability. Sober Living located at 1330 West, 3100 North, and we will turn the time over to Andrea, and then I'll take a minute. Just a reminder for all the commissioners to make sure your mics are on and to speak into your mic so the audience can hear. We appreciate those showing up.
Okay, so I just kind of wanted to go through the approval process so far, for the sober living facility, just because I feel like there's some confusion in a couple areas and also maybe a little bit of misinformation. So I just put a flow chart of how it's gone so far. And that is that very first of all, the reasonable accommodation request and the business license application was received by staff. As the city does not have a formal process to evaluate the reasonable accommodation request, it was decided, it was sent to our legal counsel to begin with. Our legal counsel and the applicant's legal counsel agreed that a third-party hearing officer should hear that. This third-party hearing officer has significant experience in land use issues and in law. He is an attorney and he evaluated this with, I believe what I heard from him was over 800 pages of documentation. So he didn't just take the applicant at their word, he did the research with FHA and ADA. Then it was evaluated based on the federal and state regulations and the city codes. I just want to clear up that this is not a public process. There was no public hearings that were waived by staff in this process. No public input should be given in an ADA reasonable accommodation request due to the fact that that should be based solely on federal and state law. So after that was evaluated, that memorandum of decision and order was issued by Mr. Crockett and was provided to both the applicant and city staff and our legal counsel. At that time is when the conditional use permit was applied for. So everything step 4 and above was done by an authority outside of the planning commission. So those decisions were rendered by the third-party hearing officer, and they are not to be evaluated, reevaluated, or adjusted by the planning commission. So now the planning commission has the conditional use permit in front of them. And it was, so because it was scheduled for that next available city council meeting, or sorry, planning commission meeting. We held the public hearing as required by our Pleasant View City Code. And all email correspondence up to the point of the public hearing was forwarded to each and every planning commission member. The public hearing was held and further public comment was not forwarded because the public hearing was closed at the June 4th meeting. So the conditional use permit was tabled at that meeting, as you all know, and now it is in front of you again. You have the option to approve that with conditions that mitigate any legitimate land use concerns that the planning commission may have, or you may deny it, or if you have reasonable evidence, then you could table it. And so I put that forward to you for approval, denial, or tabling of that. Staff recommendation remains the same, and that is that if you can mitigate any concerns of land use items, then this should be approved. There was a question at the last planning commission meeting and the reason for tabling the conditional use permit regarding the fire code, and I have asked Mr. Wilson to address that. Hold down the power button.
Hear me? There we go. All right. All right, thank you, Andrea. And I always butcher her last name under commissioners. First, planning commissioners, yeah, so the fire marshal's recommendation was to install sprinkler suppression, fire sprinkler suppression within the home. it is my opinion that that is a discriminatory practice, because that's not something that would be required on residents, that would have a family of that size. And so if it was tied to something to the effect of requiring the fire suppression because fire hydrant was too far away, or it's in a fire danger zone as established by the proper authority, when the fire marshal, chairman, federal government establishes those areas, then that's something that could be required. And I know Mr. Bidoff is counsel for the applicant, has done some research and found in the state fire code, even if that was required, there's an exception that doesn't set this property from those requirements. So as I say, my opinion is that it is not legal for the planning commission to put that requirement of the fire suppression sprinkler system on this.
Yeah, we'll just, hold on, just hold on a second. Go back, this, we actually had the 11 items that we went through, we kind of one by one. Being called this now as a potential, that's just a question. And Mr. Wilson, will follow up items that will resolve from your opinion.
My main question was who is actually the authority on this, or we have legal counsel, it's one thing, but we have the fire professional, it's another thing. And I agree with you if we're talking about residents, we don't be talking about business.
We're talking because it's, because you're taking into account the maybe at the reasonable accommodations request and the conditional use permit cannot treat it any differently than another residential use in the area. And so essentially, yes, it is a business, but it cannot be treated as such under federal law. And so, with that, the fire marshal, your decision doesn't bind the fire marshal, or the fire district in any way. If they feel differently, they are still able to go in and impose those conditions or those requirements, and they can address that with the applicant themselves.
And they would have authority on that
They do have authority on this.
to enforce that to whatever extent they decide.
Yes, yeah.
Is that, at what point in the process will that happen? Is that in their application process, or the DHHS, or
They can do that at any time. So it's just if they want to pursue that or not.
So good question there, and we'll follow up and double on the company. One feedback on his DHS actually will do. Permitting it, or they'll allow the license for it to do this. But they have their checklist, and part of their checklist could say their own fire marshal, their own inspection, if that's part of their process, right? So,
Yeah, that's part of their process, yes, but I'm not sure what, I know they do inspections, I don't know if it's related to fire. But like, from this bit off, they know the answer.
but that'll be the thing, they have software,
Yes, they're still required, it's subject to those,
regulatory body.
yes, exactly.
Okay, John,
Specific question was brought up in the table is this residential facility are 3 rated residential facility or are 4 rated residential?
Both.
Based on the administrative code,
So,
which would
Yeah,
be more than just fire, but just fire.
correct, and my opinion is that it's R3, and it's not a change of use with that, but, as I had stated, Mr. Bidoff had brought up some folks to my attention today in regards to even if it is R4, it's still accept, and if there's an exception for that.
Even not,
Good. Yeah, do you have follow-up, please?
even with the 0 to 6, 6 to 14, or 6 to 18.
Correct. The exception was up to, I think it was 16 under state code.
okay, any other questions from Mr. Wilson on one of our table items? Any questions for staff? Would like to pursue? I just wanted to do, I read part of this last time, and I wanted to remind the commission. And I'm gonna read a couple of paragraphs from this again. It's this matters in consideration, conditional use permit. The city has already determined that the proposed use in residential nature and occupancy of up to 14 residents is permitted as reasonable accommodations under the fair housing. This hearing was thus limited in scope. Decision makers not considering whether the use is allowed, whether the residents qualify as persons with disabilities, or whether the number of residents should be used. Those issues have already been decided will not be forced. Instead, the purpose of this hearing is to determine whether any reasonable anticipated land use impacts associated with the proposed use can be mitigated to reasonable conditions. Consent with cities. So that's just a reminder, that's reminding myself is want to get off into all these other tangents. That's why we have our agencies. I like fire marshal wants to continue to delve into some of those things with different age groups and bodies that have to be improvements. Folks still have to that is something to share for us. Okay, questions, thoughts, discussion? That before us.
And the second part of our motion table timeline, or the order on how licenses will be granted, whether the state, federal, or state, county, city, that is it. That's the
I
second.
want to make sure that I understand. I don't, if you want to address that or Andrea, I can take a stab at it.
So he's kind of asking what the order is on which needs to be,
Because we kind of,
sorry.
we talked about last time, it's a little bit of, well, can we stop them from doing it unless they get this first, but it's, you know, they can't proceed, they can't do it until they have all the licenses. That's what, I'll let you address this.
Right, and as I'm looking at their application to the HHS, it does ask for a copy of their business license. So I'm guessing that the HHS wants to have that information. However, you know, as recommended at the last planning commission meeting, you can put a condition on that they have to obtain all of their state licensing before they can commence business, and that they have to maintain those business or those licenses in good standing. So basically that would just push off their ability to operate that facility until they've obtained the conditional use permit, the business license, and the licensing from the state.
Which would make sense, that pending you have all those, and you can't start until you have all three.
Right,
It makes sense.
right.
Don't let it cover you. Okay.
Yeah, when I was doing some of my homework on this one, it said that one of the things that city planning commission could potentially enforce is if they could prove additional cost or financial burden on the city by the dwelling being converted. Do you know what that process would be? If say it does become a financial burden through emergency services or waste or anything like that. Is that something that we can address later, or once it's approved, we'll just,
No, it is something that you can't address.
so we can have and say, this will become a bigger financial burden than we anticipated. We want to revisit it.
Yes.
And think differently.
Would that need to be part of tonight's verbiage, or that can be totally template later, if need be?
You can include it in tonight's verbiage, I think that, and generally more helpful to be clear up front, so. Yeah, if you want to go with that, I believe that was in their application, so basically I would just, one of your conditions is, just use the language that Mr. Crockett proposed, which was operate in a manner consistent with representations made in the application.
And the condition, use produce lows, it can be revoked through the process.
Correct.
And
Mr. Wilson and the commission, to the extent that you would care to hear from me at all tonight, I'm happy to address that specific question.
Yes, let's go ahead, please.
Sure. So as Andrea, I believe, was outlining at the beginning and the various steps that this process has gone through, when Mr. Crockett is analyzing under the reasonable accommodation standard, there's two prongs to that analysis. Is it necessary and is it reasonable? And the reasonable prong of that analysis includes the analysis of whether or not there is an undue financial burden on the municipality. And so what I would at least put out there for the commission to consider is that by the sheer nature of Mr. Crockett granting this specific use, the number of individuals, he had to do, and you can read his decision, and he did, the reasonable and necessary analysis. And there's great detail in federal law about the reasonable analysis. And when it really is, when the financial burden on the city is really holding meetings such as this or paperwork burdens, those have consistently been found to be not an undue burden on the respective municipality. So where that aspect has already been resolved, I just want to make the commission aware, at least of the applicant's perspective on that front, that the undue burden on the city, it's already been determined that it's not an undue burden.
Okay, any other big questions? Questions? And I like the fact that you think that you went through the checklist, you highlighted the items that were tabling. I like the fact that you can accept our legal counsel recommendations, but fire marshal has a little to say which one you think about that and can't go back against it. We are not against it. I like the wording that was used earlier and was presented to us, obtain all required licensing in the city of Utah prior to commencement operation and maintain all required licensing and stand if those don't happen, then it can be reviewed again to both. And also the private confidential can also take place in it. So I think most of the items are covered very clearly in times. That housing was parking, with other type of things they've made recommendations or they've made statements of in their application that this will be how the parking will be handled and the number of vehicles, etc. I think that's all met with what they're standing or what they're suggesting in their application. And so if we're approving it based on the application and their statement of how they're going to operate, there is a basis of how they can.
And that's the big kind of city code as well. But that fit under our.
Okay, we have questions for staff for Mr. Wilson.
Yeah. Is it Dan, is that your name? Counselor on the
Yeah.
screen?
Dan Biddle.
That is.
I'd just like to clarify the financial burden thing just a little bit further based on what you just said.
Sure.
If, because we're increasing the occupancy a couple 100% based on what's already approved, if the burden on the emergency services was to increase double to that address or more, is that not a justifiable financial burden?
Our position on that is no.
Okay.
We certainly don't expect that to happen. I think there certainly has been, I'm going to keep it focused, but there has been a lot of public comments that would certainly detract from that, and that we do feel are discriminatory and creates a discriminatory bias. You know, when you think about a individual with a disability that lives at a particular home, and maybe they have various health issues or constraints, and that particular individual has to have a lot of emergency medical care provided to them. In no way, shape, or form would the city come and say, you can't live here anymore because you've had to call an ambulance several times, for example. And so to say, if we needed to have an ambulance coming to the house, which obviously we don't expect to have happen at all, and these are, you know, very unlikely circumstances anyways, but to say, oh, you've had it's a very ambiguous condition that I don't think could meaningfully be enforced anyways. Where does the line get drawn? If emergency services are called to the house 5 times, does that void the license? What about the other person in the neighborhood who has cancer or other medical issues, and they've had to go, you know, call emergency services a number of times, or whatever it may be? All we want is to be treated like anyone else. That's what federal law and state law requires. And if I could, just for a brief moment, because I do think it's really important to address. It's hard for me to hear everything everyone's saying. If you're speaking directly into a microphone, I can hear you, or if you speak really loud, I can hear you. But if you're not, it's really difficult. The gentleman, commissioner in the red shirt, I haven't been able to hear anything that you've said so far. But it does seem like there are concerns hanging out there about this fire. I believe his name is Ryan Barker, and this Northview Fire District report. And I would really love to just address that head on. When he cites the International Fire Code 903.2.8, and he lists the exception in his report. And he says there's 4 requirements to meet that exception. And requirement number 3 is all resident sleeping rooms and living spaces are located exclusively on the level of exit discharge, ground floor with direct exterior access. The problem with citing that provision is it's not Utah law, and it hasn't been since at least 2023. So you can go and look at Utah Code 15A-5-204. And what the state of Utah has done is said, yeah, we have adopted the International Fire Code, but we've adopted our own version of it. And so I think Mr. Wilson did a great job earlier explaining, look, we don't view this as a change in use. We are asking to be treated just like any other family. And that's very extensive in our application. I know it was referenced, there was many pages in that application, and many studies and articles and research and empirical studies showing the benefits that are provided and outlining the necessity, which is why Mr. Crockett granted that portion of our application, because it's just undisputable. But now we're here on a conditional use permit application and wondering, well, what are the conditions? And really, should we believe Northview Fire, or should we believe our council and the applicant's council? Well, if you go and look at Utah Code 15A-5-204, subsection 6, it outlines a modified exemption list. And the biggest point that you'll notice on that list is nowhere will you find this level of exit discharge. The state of Utah has said, not part of our code. Why would they do that? Probably because it's discriminatory, because you're imposing unbelievable barriers and burdens on these disabled individuals that need to live in a group setting because of their disability. And so when you go and actually look, well, what is actually required? Let's just say, and I totally disagree that we're R4, but let's just say we are, just for the sake of argument. The exact quoted language of the exemption that we would, in that circumstance, fall under is Group R4 fire areas not more than 4,500 gross square feet and not containing more than 16 residents, provided that the building is equipped throughout with an approval fire alarm system that is interconnected and receives its primary power from the building wiring and a commercial power system. Okay, great. Check, check, check. And what I find particularly troubling, and I realize that Mr. Barker is, I understand what I've been told is that Mr. Barker is not part of Pleasant View. He's part of the Northview Fire District. But he's citing a law that is 100% inapplicable. So you have to go to Utah's version of the fire code. And this is what it lays out. And what's particularly troubling is that back in March, Mr. Barker went to the house and he looked at the property and he signed off on the property and said, yes, you are good to go. Unfortunately, based on the public clamor that was heard and submitted to the city afterwards, he then submitted the decision that you all, or the report that he has in front of him. So I just wanted to point that out. We've got to look at the right section.
Thank you. I'm gonna cut you off there because you're now giving us, introducing items that are not being introduced to us as far as from the fire marshal, and that's without him being here or without seeing those letters of approval and things like that. That's introducing things that we have not seen.
I believe you do have that report.
I'm gonna cut you off at that point.
For the record, I want to say that the report was provided to us by Pleasant.
Yes, but I appreciate you, but not to this commission, and so, but I appreciate you answering the question that was presented. Okay. Jeff, anything? Fine. Appreciate it. Okay, if not, at this time, just a reminder, we tabled this, we can approve, we can deny with specific reasoning, or we can table it if we have specific need to request a dignity of something else. With us being the land use approver on this, I think that we're heading down that, but I'd like to see it, in my opinion, I would like to see a couple things that we highlight in it. That retain all the required licensing prior to the commencement of operation. I'd like to hear something that the motion that we maintain all required licensing and good standing. Then something to the financial impact. I'm not quite sure what the wording is, but as introduced, and that all items as noted in the application would be used to determine if it's a successful venture or residential in a neighborhood. So something to that effect. I would like to hear if someone would like to work towards a motion. I'd be happy to. Any comments or that? We'll do that. Sure.
We have also been, that we're looking at the motion, like to consider also conditions that require the facility to operate in a manner consistent with representation was made at prior meeting and documentation. Nothing has the city who wants to get it, but something as anybody no more than 14 residents. Does that need to be?
I don't think we need to because
That's
it's already said it, it's already in the application. So if you're saying as presented by the application.
okay, so we don't need to specific communication treatment services stated in the property. No residents in lieu of incarceration or order confinement or correctional programs as stated in the property. And no individuals composed or unthreatened without the safety of others or to property. Do we want? I guess I'm leaning towards being most specific.
If those, yeah, it's already given up, and I'll refer Ms. Wilson for recommendation, but my understanding for this is land use. I don't know if we can just spell this out, but your thoughts.
You're not required to if the condition is to operate in a manner consistent with representation in the application that they're done. Anything that they've represented in there, they will be held to if that was one of their conditions.
What would be the recourse? Yeah, looking down the road, what would be the recourse? They go down board.
It is part of the condition of the conditional use permit, so if they violate those conditions, then they're put on notice. And then, there's potentially a revocation hearing of the conditional use. permit.
And who would determine those if they're again?
So as part of due process, they have an opportunity to be heard. And then, if they're supporting evidence, one way or the other, or that would be.
I just want to say that, number 9 on the letter that, or the, memo that was provided to us last meeting, which has already stated tonight, operate in a manner consistent with the representations made in the application and supporting documents. There are a lot of representations already in this letter that I've gone through, that was provided to me by other people who have gone through it. And there's, things that address parking. There's things that address the community will not create any additional parking, traffic, noise, lighting, et cetera, that is already present. There's specific things that they presented to us that I think is covered by that. And I think if that's our motion, there's a lot of things that they need to be held to account. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Yeah, I'd like to put that for you. I appreciate that. Good, we have a motion. Reminder to appear that people by those that's can.
I would make a motion that, we approve the conditional use permit with the, 11 items noted on the memo from the Andrew presented to us, from the, June 4th meeting, and and with an emphasis that there will be another, or how do we do it? That's, well, that's already addressed, the licensing permits is addressed here. But there will be I mean, they addressed it in their memo too already, but there
It wouldn't be around the plan.
Yes, correct, yes.
You want something special in there? Okay, so.
Okay, so we're good with that, okay.
Okay,
Can I amend, ready for suggesting to amend that motion?
hold on, he's made a motion, so,
You can do a counter motion if you don't have a say.
okay, so yeah, so hold on. We have a motion on the table to consider a rezone and consideration of rezone and recommendation for this division.
Not rezone, conditional use.
Yes. Recommended, conditional use, jump right in. There we go. Consideration of a recommendation for conditional use permit for residential facility for persons with disability. Totally located 1330 west, 3100 north. As written or as stated, also the conditions for, as stated, for decisions allowed by, on the memorandum provided to us, 11 items that they would be, part of the consideration will be. That is the motion on the table. If we have a second. Then we'll, especially for, you can now, if we don't have a second, is there a second? There you go, second, you have someone who'd like to make an amendment. Well,
I
you're
have a motion to take the motion and add specifically the licensing the document always requires state of Utah licensing. But like specifically stating these licensing from the state of Utah, Beaver Morgan Health Department and Western State, but prior to that.
Let me ask, are those necessary? They need to already be spelled out because some of these may not be required, or you're assuming that those are required.
I looked at, they need to have some, from statute. For the application, whether it's R3 or R4.
Yeah,
And it's just inspection and.
I would just say all required license. One question I do have, is that including in there the conditions of the fire suppression? Promotion.
So on the list that was provided from Mr. Puckett's memo was that they comply with all generally applicable public health and safety standards. So is that, I mean, that's, you're going off the original list?
Yeah, I'll go off the
Okay.
original list, the exact wording from the original list.
And then as far as the health department, I believe that that would be included in DHHS's approval of their licensing. That they would have to meet certain requirements to even get their license from DHHS to operate.
Way I did, they need to apply for specifically.
Right, but they have to provide that information to DHHS as part of their inspections and
No,
licensing.
instead of saying, and county, I'll just state all state and local licenses are required for this
I
operation.
keep that word is opposed to the document you just stated.
So, so I could rephrase this with, if I can do this right, are you going to take his amendment that we say all state and local licensing required to operate this business?
Anything that would, well, says understanding of.
Yeah, and it's good standing, so, Andrew, did you get that changed?
Yes, I changed it to obtain all required state and local licensing prior to commencing operation.
I have a question. Wait, hold on. Will you accept that as your motion, amendment to your motion? Yes. Okay, now we'll open it up. Do we have a second to the amendment? After I identify the usually no discussion on, but I'm okay at this point, so go ahead.
My question, council, is this conditional use permit, do we have to have verbiage in there that said it's non-transferable?
You cannot do that.
So it's for the property,
Correct.
not for the individuals or not for the business that's applying.
No,
It's for the property,
it's not good for that.
and it runs
Yeah.
indefinitely.
Yes, unless there's some sort of violation or abandonment.
Okay, so if they abandon the facility, then we will put it back to.
But then, yeah, and there's a certain time frame.
The business license is to the owners.
Correct, yes, only the, sorry. Good clarification, only the conditional use permit is tied to the land, anything else, doesn't, is not transferable. So the business license, I believe the license with, the state is not transferable as well, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. So if we have a motion on the table, we have a second.
So now we're hesitant, right?
No, it's your motion, and you accepted his amendment. So, motion on the table, Jeff, you accept with the 11 items listed with modification and amendment as suggested by John. Do we have a second?
Yes, I better second that.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion on the table? To approve the recommended, to approve the conditional use permit for the residential facility with 11 items and specifying for state and local licensing. Before, business begins. Any discussion? Clarification before we vote. Are there 6 of us or 7 tonight?
There are 6.
Okay, so it'll be 6 of us today, won't be, it's not finished with this training yet. So we'll go ahead, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Did I catch 100% on that? Is that too late for the record? Everybody else, okay, thank you.
No, I didn't say I, but go ahead.
Go ahead, well, Okay, if you, I didn't know if I heard, so that's why I was asking for clarification. We do have 100% for the record, for the, reporter on that. We thank for all of you that have, showed up tonight. It's not always a fun, and popular thing, but we, as this body, and thank them for all the hard work and that there's been a lot of studying, both on your side and a lot of reading, a lot of studying by this group, to make sure we do what we're tasked to do. Sometimes it's not a popular thing or a pleasant thing, and, but we're required to follow what the books, what the laws are in the books and follow those, and that's how we make our recommendations. I strongly always suggest when there's a big crowd, is please come and help us as we do our general plan, as we do ordinance changes. We would love to have people come feedback, so we can prepare for, things that come in the future, make sure our books are the way that we'd like to see. That doesn't make it easy for this one, but we love, to have the public input as we create the ordinances to the board for all of cities. So thank you for joining. Okay, we'll go ahead and, call the end of the meeting, but, real quick, is there any staff business for us tonight? We need to finish up. Question for the next meeting, we are still on for
July 9th.
July 9th, okay, so that'll be just after the holidays. If anybody, commission that will not be able to attend, make sure to pass that word on, so we make sure we have, commission. And thank you for everybody showing up. Quick reminder, festivities, the planning, Pleasant View Founder's Day, and not this weekend, so we'll see everybody there. And want to ourselves, so thank you. Motion to adjourn tonight. We'll make a motion. Motion to adjourn. Just made a motion, it's a second. Second. All in favor, say aye. Thank you.